Joined on stage today with Bryan Neider, the Senior Vice President of Global Operations and Shared Services for Electronic Arts.
Good morning.
And I think if there's anything certain for us today, Bryan, is both coming from the Bay Area, and Lauren, I suspect you're from the Bay Area too. This is probably the most formal addressed group we've seen in some time.
I had to find the suit in the back of my closet. We usually don't put suit jackets on.
And we managed to get blue and white together, so that's pretty good.
We did. We didn't coordinate. Very good.
Anyway, to set the context a little bit, Bryan, for the group, video games as an industry is comprised of PC gaming, which is probably one of the earlier stages, mobile, online, consoles. We're probably familiar with all that, but it also incorporates advertising as part of the in-game experience, and that's a growing segment. Globally and in the U.S., we're forecasting about 6% growth on a CAGR basis over the forecast period. And the U.S. market's $14 billion of a global market of about $65 billion. So I share that because you've said to me, and that's a pretty robust growth. And it's the third largest segment in our outlook, only behind internet access and internet advertising as far as its ability to our forecasted growth. I lead that because you shared with me that you think we're about to go into the golden age of interactive gaming.
Yeah,
so maybe you could share some of your thoughts.
So I've been in the industry for quite a while, about 25 years in electronic arts. And we've certainly struggled for respectability as an industry in terms of a medium of entertainment. And what's been happening recently is the growth with smart devices certainly has been a key component of what's happening for gaming around the world, but also for consoles and technology in general, allowing us to provide the kind of entertainment that we think consumers want. I think I shared with you a story. I was at a talk at a dinner club my dad is a member of, and everyone is probably over 70, and they wanted to hear about Madden football. And so they invited mainly their grandkids. And so there are probably about 30 kids and about 120 members. And so I go, how many of you are gamers? And of course, the 30 kids raised their hand, and virtually none of the members of the club raised their hand. I go, how many of you have a game on your phone? And nearly everyone raised their hand. And so for us, that was sort of, for me, just a very clear illustration of how gaming is not what a lot of people think it is. It really is a mass medium. People spend more time playing games on their phones than they do anything else. This last year, texting tied gaming. There are 1.5 billion gamers on phones around the world. There are almost 400 million gamers on traditional consoles. So for us, moving from a kind of hobbyist industry into a mass media industry is really transformative, not only for our game designers, but I think also how we're perceived overall in providing entertainment to people around the world. And we dreamed about these days. I can remember when, at one time at EA, we used to ship our games in a baggie with a photocopied manual. And we thought that was pretty cool. And so we've gone from an industry that has really been sort of engineering technology driven to one that is an incredible magical blend of left brain and right brain between creatives and technology. And about the golden age, the smart device, we believe, in about 2 to 3 years will be as powerful as the last generation console. And you think about what that can do around artificial intelligence, graphics. There's certainly some issues that need to be handled with heat dissipation on phones. But you look at what's going on inside of consoles today, the latest generation of hardware, the ability to provide very engaging environments, it's only going to keep getting better for us, which means our storytelling is getting better. The environments are richer, more compelling to audiences around the world. And so, you just look out over the next few years, we think that gaming will have an audience about the size of how many? 3.5 billion probably in about 5 years. And that's about the installed base of televisions around the world for homes. And so I think for us, the job now is to be able to continue delivering the kind of entertainment that people want, wherever they want it, on whatever device they want.
That's great, thanks. Lauren and John talked about cross-platforms and cross-devices. I know we were just kind of having a quick chat at the table about how does cross-device impact you and your consumers, and the guy that's playing FIFA on his PC.
Right.
How does the cross-device play in?
That's a great question. So our kind of motto is that we want games available wherever, at any time, on whatever device consumers have. And the thing for interactive entertainment, it needs to be relevant to the device. I can't provide the same sort of experience on a big screen TV for a FIFA or a Battlefield or a Madden that you can on a phone. On the other hand, there's a lot of things we can do to augment that experience in a FIFA game, for example, with a team manager, club manager on your device, maybe updating your playbook for Madden. So a lot of things we can do and still provide a Madden and FIFA game on a PC or on a smart device, but it's unique and relevant for that platform. But right now, the key is making sure that there's that loop so people can stay engaged with their team, their game, wherever they are with whatever device they have handy.
Yeah, I think that's really important when you think about how platform dedicated the consumer is, that even the cross devices is really important for you.
Yep.
That goes into, we wanted to chat a little bit about the superfan.
Sure.
I think all of us have talked about that today. It's an exciting area. I know in your industry, and you guys coined the superfan as the whale.
Yes.
And tell us how.
I like superfan better than
yeah.
I think we start using that.
It's a little more polite.
But it's that is the industry term calling the heavy user, the whales. I think it's like anything with superfan. It's the thing that's been interesting over the years is game development. Typically, call it 5 years ago. We're talking about phones about 5 years ago. Development cycle was probably anywhere from 18 months to 36 months for a game. And we get feedback all the time about features and things that people want in a game. But you think about the development cycle, in today's environment, that is way too slow. And so we had a lot of fans that would give us feedback, but it was a very kind of discreet event. They'd send a letter. Yes, we still get some letters. But back then they would send letters or emails, where now it is real time. They're giving you feedback in the game right then and there. And it is, the double-edged sword is the super fans are very passionate. And they also are sort of like a great coach or a great teacher. You had a game and they'll give you feedback, but it's sort of, what can you do for me tomorrow? And understanding that their passion is a great insight how to keep making the game experience better is one of the things that we've started to embrace a lot more engagement earlier in development and getting them participating of giving us insights about how they think we can keep improving the overall experience. So I think it really is embracing the fans. I think we're talking about some things where we have a lot of added on content, or things around special events meeting the designers. Those are becoming a lot more popular, like I think where some mentioned music, where those things are becoming far more important for the community, that we don't control the community. I mean, they control themselves, and they want to be bringing people together to share their experience for that game and that story and that designer and that development team. And so our job now is to really help facilitate that. Rather than guide it, right? It's got to be sincere and it's got to be authentic, because I think people can sniff that out if you're trying to make money from it. It really is giving them value to be part of that community and that experience that the superfans help drive.
Yeah, I mean, one good example that we've talked about is the proliferation of the multi-channel networks on YouTube, right? Those aren't curated by EA per se. Those are just by dedicated fans that are going and showing,
sure,
the fostering the community and nurturing it. So I mean, I imagine that's something you monitor and you take
we
note
have
of.
A very robust consumer experience team. It used to be customer service, consumer experience. We've been really changing the focus and vocabulary around player-centric. Everything we do has got to be player-centric, putting the player first, understanding what their needs are. So we have a very robust community management, being able to get information out. I mean, the desire for knowledge about where the games are, what the design is looking like, things inside the game that they're experiencing, they want responses now. And ultimately, at first that seems challenging. In the end, that's exactly what you want from your fan base, being able to give you that kind of insight so you can modify, improve, and make things better and keep them happy. I mean, that's ultimately what it's about. And today's technology, whether it's Twitter or email or blogs or whatever it might be, give us an incredible opportunity to be able to reach consumers much faster, more efficiently, and hopefully keep them happy with the kind of games we're creating.
And a quick one, what's the most common place you get feedback? What's the most common channel?
There are blog posts on all sorts of industry gaming websites. And then there are individual fans that have their own blog sites on particular games. So really going through all of the sites and providing feedback. And then, like I said, we have a very robust consumer experience team, and so they do feedback to us there.
Great.
And we run hosted blogs as well.
Yeah.
So a little bit of everything.
Yeah. So I know EA is trying to build games as a service, and build that community, and with the mantra of, the best and most immersive interactive experience that you can in the gaming experience, right? And we talk in our thought process about the connected consumer. Can you share some thoughts on how that your journey of going to games as a service and the connected consumer, and how that has shaped sort of how you're going to market?
Well, I think so. I'm sure for all of us here, it's a global community, right? So the idea of being North American centric is gone. Half of our industry is outside of North America and Europe, and so when we get to games as a service and connected community, it means that we have to orchestrate everything around the globe real time with whatever devices. So little things like QA and quality testing on smart devices, there are probably 2,500 different smart devices we have to test just to make sure a product works. And that may be only for one small feature of a console game. First parties being Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo are a little bit in Apple or pretty tight on their quality control in terms of that experience globally. But you think about making that connected experience real time, and then once you go live, it doesn't stop. And if you think for us 5 years ago, you shipped a game to retail, not that it was over, but it was pretty much the process was done. Now we look at it as that's the beginning of the relationship, is the release of the product, not the end of it. In fact, it really starts probably a year before the release of the game. And so the time horizon of games as a service and the connected consumer, it is starting at least a year in advance of the actual release of a product. And then it goes on long after that to maintain that community, maintain the environment, and keep the game fresh for consumers. And I will say that for us as an industry for a long time, primarily Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, from technology standpoint, kind of dictated where we're going to go. I would say that they're certainly still incredibly important, but consumers have taken the reins of where we're going. And I think for everybody, the shift has been letting the consumers take us and enjoy the ride, because it's actually pretty thrilling, maybe sometimes a little scary, but the fact is they're taking us in places that I think make, for us, the entertainment experience that much better.
Great. So you touched on the global market. When you think about, I said the U.S. market is 14 billion of 65. That only represents 22% of the total market. Where does globalization and expanding outside the U.S., and I know you're well on your way, but where do you see globalization and moving outside the U.S. for EA?
Well, it's absolutely critical for long-term growth. Fastest growth, like I said, are areas outside of North America and Europe. We have roughly 80 locations around the world, 25 development studios on 4 continents, 5 continents, and we have a very robust localization and culturalization team, because with I'm sure a lot of you experience this, but the gameplay styles are very different for certain geographies. And a gameplay style in Korea, for example, which has typically been, I would argue, anywhere from 5+ years ahead of other curves in terms of kind of leading technology and gameplay, it's a very different style than gameplay in, say, Germany, which is also still very PC-centric. And so we have to make sure that the play balance and the games, as well as you get into a game like a FIFA soccer, you talk about passionate fans, the voiceover, the slang, all that has to be incredibly accurate. And we have a very robust localization team to make sure we get the nuance right, the terminology is right for the game and the sport, and that is a lot of work well up front. But if it's not real and you hear people call things the wrong way and you're in Brazil, they're going to be pretty upset that we didn't do our homework about the game, because they are the fan and we need to make sure it's real for them. So that is a very important part of it, and having development teams in country, kind of hand on the pulse of what is current and relevant is mission critical.
Help us understand the difference between localization and culturalization.
So localization would be, I would call that voiceover and text over for localizing the content. Culturalization is getting the nuance right? Spending the extra energy to make sure you have the right slang in a game if you're going to be doing that. It may be play balance in the game different for a particular country. for a release in that country that is more sensible for the game style in that geography. We had a game, Plants vs. Zombies. We had a edition that we released that was exclusive for China that had content that was relevant for China that our developers and designers there felt it would make the game that much better. So they had their own release inside that market. That's an example.
Great.
FIFA Soccer also has some localization, mainly around team management and kind of fan site attached to the product.
And do you do that on an in-country basis when you start getting into the localization and the culturalization, or do you do that centrally, or?
It is a little bit of both. It depends on the game. So a little bit of both.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. We talked about data. Deborah asked the question to Marcella about data. How do you use data? You shared a lot about Superfan, but how does data and what you gain from the consumer as they're playing weigh into your development and your strategy?
So there's an enormous amount of, that's a great question, and it is a struggle for the right balance. People want a tailored experience, but they don't want it so that the information you're gathering is kind of creepy, right? I mean, that's the reality. And so what we do get is we get a lot of telemetry data around gameplay. So we can tell sort of from an anonymous basis where the game is difficult, where it's too easy, where people fall out, so we can keep balancing and improving the game itself. Then there are a lot of opt-ins that people do want to share more detail, and for that we'll give them more experiences around, I'll use a Battlefield game, weapon upgrades, things like that that they care about. But it's got to be a very fine balance between, you want it to feel more like a feature than an ad. And I think Amazon probably does one of the better jobs of that from what I've seen, where I actually like the recommendations. I don't feel like it's intrusive versus a spam email I may get from another company. And so we're trying to strike that right balance, and that's why we keep going kind of that player first. What would a player want? If I'm a player in that game, what would I find interesting and motivating, and how do we use that data to provide it? And do it in a way that is relevant and meaningful to them, and they don't get upset that we have over-indexed on too much knowledge where they feel it is inappropriate and out of bounds. The other thing we all deal with is just geography, legal issues globally, because it is very inconsistent. And so our games have to be tailored for each geography in terms of, and I'm sure a lot of you deal with that also, the data that you pull and opt-ins and opt-outs are different by geography. You have to make sure every game is tailored to that.
Great. Thank you. So I can turn it over to the audience and just one after one question here for some Q&A. So if you have something for Bryan, please share it. But while the group's thinking about that, Bryan,
yes.
I know in-game advertising is something that the video game industry has struggled with to adopt. We're forecasting at a 12% growth rate on a CAGR on the 5-year horizon. What's your vision, and how do you see in-game advertising for the industry and EA maybe?
I think for the industry overall, it is a huge opportunity. So when we talked a little bit earlier about the whales, so inside of PC and mobile games primarily, when they are free to play, roughly 3% of the audience are serious monetizers. And that's driving, every year there's roughly 5 mobile games that generate over $1 billion of revenue. So that's from 3%. So you think about the 97% that aren't being monetized, and you start thinking about disposable income in emerging markets, it feels like ad opportunities are an obvious option that should be considered. Now, how to do that, and doing that in a way that doesn't intrude on the game experience, is one of the things we struggle with. Certainly in a console game, which we consider sort of like the theatrical release, the big budget experience, consumers don't want to interrupt the gameplay and pause that suspension of disbelief while they're playing with an ad. So it needs to be relevant for the device and the platform. But you start looking at the numbers, we're getting to 3+ billion people with smart devices, and on PC and on console, there is an ample opportunity to find a way to bring meaningful connection between what consumers want, our players want, and advertisers and other companies that want to reach them. But again, it's got to be relevant, and it has to feel unintrusive.
Yeah, small but growing
Huge.
Fast. Yeah.
Yep.
How about from the audience? Anything for Bryan in particular? Yeah.
I'm Jake Dorn. I'm with Digicardi. We're a WPP agency. Where do you guys see things going with Oculus Rift and the upcoming, beacons and kind of virtual reality technologies?
So for those of you who aren't aware of it, Oculus Rift is a virtual reality headset that gives you a 3D immersive environment. There are a couple of technologies out there with that. It is very, very cool. We certainly look at all technology platforms. We're platform agnostic in the sense that where consumers want to go, we want to make sure our games are going to be there. Oculus Rift and others provide, I think, a great opportunity for some games to really show off in that kind of environment. So I think it's an exciting development. And I can't say a whole lot more. We're looking at all those sort of technologies all the time. And I personally think they're pretty cool. So that's not a company statement. I think it's pretty cool technology.
But that sort of 3D technology is probably
It is.
going to hit the PC sector first, seems the most to dovetail with.
And I didn't mention that, but the PC has had a real renaissance in the last few years with play for free. You know, when you have no barrier, you talked about friction. I mean, that's one of the things we deal with as well, is removing all the barriers of friction to get more consumers into playing, and that's really where the PC's had a renaissance. And it's also helped on piracy. I mean, in a way you want for the free game, please pirate it. And I don't know if you know the numbers. I don't remember what it is inside of the movie business, but for PC software, sort of at the high watermark or low watermark, depending on where you look at it, is there are roughly 20 pirated copies for every sold version of a game. And so what's happened with Play for Free is it really has caused a renaissance of creativity and new content being released because the model changed, and which is really exciting, very, very exciting.
Great.
Everybody here's a gamer? Or at least one on your phone?
I'll admit it. Anyway, Bryan, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah, good job.